Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. I'm your host, Hannah MacDonald, and I'll be bookending the conversation with some of the most exciting voices from the bookish world. Hello and welcome to Books to Screen, the series where I invite bookish guests to join me for deep dives into my favourite topic, adaptations. Joining me for this instalment is Katherine Brabon. Long-time listeners of the podcast will remember Katherine from our episode back in February 2024 when we discussed her incredible novel, Body Friend. But if you haven't listened to that episode, I will tell you a bit about our wonderful guest. Katherine is an award-winning writer from Melbourne, Australia. Her work has appeared in Vogue, Australian Book Review, the Australian Financial Review, Sydney Morning Herald, and more. She is also a regular contributor to Melbourne's Lindsay magazine. Katherine is the author of 4 novels. Her first novel, The Memory Artist, won the Australian Vogels Literary Award in 2016. It was shortlisted in the NSW Premier's Literary Awards and longlisted in the Indie Book Awards. Her second novel, The Shut-Ins, won the People's Choice Award at the New South Wales Premier's Literary Awards in 2022. It was shortlisted for the Christina Stead Prize for Fiction and longlisted for the Voss Prize and the ALS Gold Medal. Her third novel, which she spoke to us about, Body Friend, was shortlisted for the Stella Prize and the ALS Gold Medal, and we loved it so much. And Katherine's latest novel, Cure, was published by Ultimo Press in Australia last year. It's set in Italy, and it's an exploration of imperfect mother-daughter dynamics, chronic illness, and healing. And if there are any UK publishers listening, we want a copy of this, so make it happen, please. Katherine joins me today to discuss Shy by Max Porter and its film adaptation, Steve. Shy is a novella set over the course of a day in the 90s from the perspective of 16-year-old Shy at his boarding school for troubled boys. It's told in Porter's signature experimental style and became a #1 Sunday Times bestseller when it was published by Faber in 2023. Steve is the Netflix film adaptation of Shy, which was released last year with a stellar cast featuring Cillian Murphy, Little Sims, and Emily Watson. The film focuses on the story of head teacher of Shy's boarding school, Steve, as he tries to navigate a chaotic day at the school whilst battling his own mental health struggles. I have the most notes I've ever had for any adaptation we've done so far, and here to discuss this with me, Katherine, welcome back to A Pair of Bookends.
Hello, so nice to be back. Thank you for having me.
Before we dive into Shy and Steve, I have prepared you for this quick fire of adaptation questions. Are you ready?
And I'm so glad you prepped me because my mind would go blank otherwise, I think.
Forget everything you've ever read or watched.
I know.
Okay, so to start, what is, in your opinion, the best adaptation?
I feel like I'm going to list about 3 or 4, so I'm so bad at just choosing one. But this question also encouraged me to go back in time and think way back as well. So one that I loved more recently was Burning by the Korean director Lee Chang-dong, and it's an adaptation of a short story by Murakami. And it's a short story that I read after watching this film. What I loved is that the short story kind of dwells completely sort of in the unfinished and the unsaid, and it suggests kind of a course. It's quite creepy as to what might happen. The film, the director and the writers have taken sort of the atmosphere of that story and made a whole film out of it. And they've gone way further. It's one of those ones you don't want to kind of say spoilers on, but the film is amazing. Like it goes way beyond. So it's that kind of the power of suggestion. In the short story, which is really short, just like something that's in the New Yorker. I think it's like 5,000 words or something, to make a whole film and to those potential avenues that your mind thinks might have happened in the story, but you don't know. They choose one, I guess, in the film, and they kind of, so the story is a starting point, and then the film is this whole other thing, and it's set in a different country because it's set in South Korea. But yeah, it's an amazing kind of exploration of male, I guess, masculinity, male anger, class dynamics, modern alienation of sort of young people in modern day Korea. There's so much that it does. But yeah, that's kind of a favorite.
I definitely need to watch that.
It's really good. And then I was also thinking, I actually love a Baz Luhrmann adaptation. I actually kind of love what he does. I was thinking Romeo and Juliet, to do that and set it in California, and to set it in this like completely modern day environment. When I haven't watched that film in years, but when I think of that, I'm like, that was kind of so creative in the sense of I see adaptation, it's such an art. It's sort of, it can't be, we don't necessarily want it to be like word for word of, and maybe this, I've got some favorites as well that do create the world of a book so well. But I think something like that, I think is sort of pretty amazing. I've probably got other favorites I'll bring up in other points because I feel like I'll just keep going on. But yeah, they're two that kind of stuck in my mind.
Yeah, no, amazing choices. What is, in your opinion, the best character casting?
Oh, I found this one so hard. But an adaptation I loved recently was My Brilliant Friend, Elena Ferrante's series. And because that's 4 books. And then so it's this, they did it as a TV series, which I guess is great because they could go into so much detail and the books are so detailed. And I felt like the series was cast so well. So this is kind of like, I just thought that particularly the 2 girls, then teenagers, then women, the way that they cast them, but it would be so difficult. I think, you're with them as girls for the first kind of series, but then, you get this new cast for the next season because it's a new book and they're much older to kind of carry the audience. It's kind of hard. I just find that that must be such a difficult decision. And I remember feeling a little bit strange as it ticked over into the last season and the cast, I think maybe because it was the 3rd series or season, was representing maybe women at my age. I think I got really invested in like them in their 30s and early motherhood and everything. When it moved to older, I felt a bit a jolt, but then I in the end love that cast across the board. So I think that was amazing. And I think with Steve, the adaptation we're going to talk about, Jay, I think it's Lycurgo. I'm not sure. He was incredible. And that reminded me of another casting of sort of playing that young adolescent, I feel like male. I feel like there's some really amazing opportunity to cast sort of unknowns in that as well. And I know there's this one film with Cate Blanchett. It's called The New Boy or A New Boy, and it's set in this like remote kind of church in Australia in the desert. And this kind of, I guess she's like, they call it like a renegade nun. Cate Blanchett brings these Indigenous boys to kind of basically indoctrinate them in Catholicism and Christianity.
Oh my gosh.
And the boy who plays the main, like the new boy, I wrote his name down because Aswan Reed, that's right. He was amazing. Like he's from Alice Springs, like Central Australia. He'd never, as far as I know, acted in anything before.
Oh, wow.
And something about casting these, like he captured like the newness as well of like that time in his life. Devastating kind of film, but it was, that was not an adaptation, but just a brilliant film to recommend, I think.
Oh, wow. Also, I would say, going back to you mentioning Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, that, in my opinion, nobody can do Mercutio better than the actor.
Like that.
That is the
I can
gold
still
standard.
hear him saying like, a plague on both your houses as he's dying. Oh, so powerful.
Incredible.
Yeah, I don't think that'll just, in how many thousands of years of adaptations of that. How are you going to beat that?
No, nobody can stop that.
Totally.
An adaptation that you would love to see?
Oh, I feel like I'm probably stealing from another episode, but I feel like I remember someone was talking about A Secret History and that it never happened.
Yes, yeah.
And then I loved that they didn't want to see it. And I'm bringing it up because I'm on the fence completely. And I'm like, I can't decide if I want to see. I think it's interesting when you love the atmosphere of a book so much, but then, I'm wondering, could you actually convey it effectively on screen? Because that's one that it's a book that I think about that's so, so well known. And so many of the books that I maybe love, I wouldn't want to see because they're maybe like the slow kind of thing. Like I love Deborah Levy as an author, and I'm kind of scared to watch Hot Milk, which is the new adaptation.
Yes, I've not watched that yet.
Because I keep hearing all these terrible reviews about it, and I thought, I feel bad, one, that's what's happening about a book that I really like, but it also makes me a bit uneasy. To watch it. So but maybe I feel like maybe I would like to see The Secret History. I feel like that's such a maybe an iconic kind of book that would be pretty powerful, I think.
I mean, I think I made a pretty good case on that episode for it to be a HBO series. I
think so. Let's just keep waiting. You never know, the word will get out there.
And I've prepared you for this question, but if you chose one of your books to be adapted, which one would it be?
Oh, I love that question. I've been actually chatting to a wonderful screenwriter who's working on a script for Body Friend.
Oh my God.
Which is really exciting. It feels like that's like like the first enormous step, and then it seems like to actually get something to film is a whole nother whole nother world, whole nother possibility. But yeah, and that has brought about some really interesting conversations about how you adapt something that Body Friend is, you know, the first person narration, very interior, which is the kind of book I love, and the kind of book I love to see maybe attempted to be translated to film, because I think that's quite challenging to kind of bring across that first person, really sort of interior voice. So possibly that, or Cure, maybe the new one, because I feel like
you want to go out to Italy, don't you?
I want to go to Italy. Yeah, I want to hang out at Lake Como, of course. I feel like there's so much beautiful sensories, you know, detail and things that could be brought about there. And just also like a mother-daughter body dynamic would be really interesting to me, because it's about a mother and daughter who both have the same kind of chronic illness. I feel like maybe there would be, interesting possibilities for how to kind of represent that, because it's, again, there's so much unspoken, I think. And I love that, you know, I love that adaptation would be its own thing. That's its own kind of art form. And for somebody to try and create that on screen would be, very, very different and really interesting to me.
Yeah, I would love to see Body Friend on screen. I think it's such an
Fingers
incredible
crossed,
book. So
it'll, all the millions of
out.
steps will happen. We'll see. I'll keep you updated.
Thank you. Next up, do you read before you watch?
Sometimes, but I think there's been plenty of instances where I have not read, like, at all still, probably. Like, I've watched adaptations that I just haven't then gone and read the book. I wouldn't go racing to read it after, probably. I think some favorites that I've loved recently, like the Claire Keegan adaptations, A Quiet Girl, which was an adaptation of Foster, which is basically a short story as well. And then Small Things Like These as well. I think they were two that I was sort of, I reread before watching, because I was, I think if I love a book, I like to reread before watching an adaptation, because I think I want to be taken back into the feel of the book and then see what is done. But then there's some others that I recently loved. This is another one I was going to maybe recommend, is Ripley, the adaptation of Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith, which I haven't read that book, but the adaptation as a series is a more recent one.
Is this Andrew Scott?
Yes. Yeah, and it's brilliant. But I haven't read the book, but I loved it as a series. I thought it was brilliantly. The cinematography was amazing. It's like a lot of black and white, and it's these like amazing locations in Italy. The way they've kind of captured like shadow and the eeriness of these like apartment buildings, and it's beautifully done. So I'm really either or. I think it's a book I love. I really I reread it, but then I'm happy to watch something that I haven't read the book.
And just you mentioning Small Things Like These reminded me that the director of Small Things Like These is the same director of Steve.
That's right. Tim Mielentz, I think.
I've got it written down somewhere.
Which is interesting. It's always interesting to see, because I'm guessing like he and Cillian Murphy worked together on various projects. It's always interesting to see the different creative partnerships and how they might then work on something new together down 100%. The track, and how you probably get a bit of a team around you, I would imagine, for these things, and then just sort of continue on and find new projects to do together.
Yeah, for sure. We'll dive more into him in a moment, but I need to finish off these questions. So, an upcoming adaptation that you're excited for, or one that you enjoyed recently?
So definitely the Ripley is one I've enjoyed recently. But you probably know the amazing Australian author Diana Reid.
Yes.
She had Love and Virtue,
which I've still not read. It's been on my shelf for ages. I feel like I'm going to love it.
I think hers are out in the UK. I'm pretty sure. I know she's based over here now. But she, she's one of those amazing writers. She's done 3 novels, and then she just announces one day that she's done the screenplay for Sense and Sensibility.
Yes.
So that will be coming out, I think, this year or maybe next year. I'm not sure. I think it started filming. So to see what she's done, I'm really excited about. And I know there's some big ones either out or coming out this year. It feels like there's always classics getting adapted, obviously, but I know that there's The Odyssey by Christopher Nolan. So that's a huge one to come out. And then there's an adaptation of Frankenstein as well, which interests me because I loved the film about Mary Shelley with Elle Fanning. I thought that was really amazing. It's really beautiful. It's more about the process of writing Frankenstein. So I guess they're 2 that are on my radar as well, knowing that it's like a year or another year for classics as well. But super particularly excited to see Diana Reid's adaptation, because I feel amazed that this author from Sydney who's had such a successful career has then gone and just done this huge screenplay. So I'm excited
Yeah,
to
it's iconic.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Love that. I can't wait for that either. An author that you think would be great at writing for screen?
Yeah, this one kind of stumped me. I think probably I'm thinking Diana Reid would
Diana
be
Reid,
really
yeah.
great. I think, I'm feeling like she's probably, it's tying, I'm answering two questions with one author, but I feel like
Fair.
I feel like she's got a great voice and I feel like she's, amazing for dialogue. And I feel like I think there's a lot that she'll be able to do. And
Amazing.
to adapt a classic, like a, big classic,
It's a lot of
really
pressure.
impressive. Totally, yeah. It's amazing.
My last question in this quickfire is an adaptation that you hated.
Yeah, this one stumped me as well because I feel like it feels mean to hate.
Yeah,
But
fair.
also, I couldn't, in all honesty, I couldn't think of any that I like hated. But
Such a strong word.
it is. There's one I tried to start and I didn't finish. I started to watch and I didn't finish. So that maybe I'll mention that one. So Annie Ernaux's Simple Passion, which is one of her
Oh, I didn't know that had been
well-known, like,
adapted.
little, well, I saw it, I think I was just kind of maybe, I think I saw it I was looking just for maybe a film that I was maybe based on a book that I liked, but I think I started watching it and I remember stopping it and not getting very far. And I wondered, like, Simple Passion is, about a woman in the grip of an affair with a man, and it's completely in her mind. It's about how, every single thing she does, she hears his name and, she just feels a particular way. She, any mention of the country that he's from, like Russia or the USSR at the time, is she's sort of on alert. It's about how your whole, like, mind is just kind of shaped by obsession and desire for a person. And I think I read a few reviews of the film after I attempted to watch it, and it was sort of saying that it was basically an erotic film and it's actually more about them being together. And I was like, oh, maybe it's that line between, like, it's more powerful to kind of represent the desire, and the desire is that need for that person, but it's not necessarily fulfilled. And it's like, there's such an atmosphere of need in the book that is maybe really hard to carry across to a film, because you'd just be like, where is this guy? Is he even cast? Because so much of the book is about her just kind of waiting for him, basically waiting for him to call, waiting for him to come over. So I feel like I didn't get into it, and maybe it's a very different kind of adaptation, which again, each to their own. But it brings up interesting questions around adapting and what you kind of want from a book.
Yeah.
But it just didn't really gel with me. So not hated, but not finished.
Hater, but not finished. Okay. Well, you've made me want to watch it now.
Well, I should try and probably attempt to, but
But let's get into what you're here to talk about, which is Shy by Max Porter and its film adaptation, Steve. Tell us why this was your adaptation of choice.
So I saw your call out for wanting to talk to authors about adaptations not long after I watched Steve, and that book and then that film, they're two that have kind of stayed in my mind, I guess. Like, that film I found such an interesting adaptation, and we'll obviously get into it, but for what it kind of what it changes, I suppose. I find, like, they've got even different names, which points to the huge big difference, which is perspective. There's Shy is, we're with Shy for most of it. We're completely in his mind, we're in his headphones, we're in his past, we're in his self-talk, we're everywhere. And then to suddenly make a switch. I was listening to some interviews before this, and Cillian Murphy, who plays Steve, said it's basically shifting the spotlight. And I thought, oh, that's such a great phrase, because it's sort of, you have all the actors on the stage and it's whose perspective are you from, who's talking. And so for Steve, it's completely swung the other way. And Steve is one of the teachers in the book, and then it's to bring his narrative. We don't really know all that much about him in the novel, but then he's given this whole perspective in life in the film. So I thought, it's so interesting for me. I love perspective. I love, even when I teach creative writing to students, I sort of say, you're starting with all these decisions, really. Like, you could go from anyone's perspective. You can go from, I've read an amazing short story from the perspective of a cat, and then you can write from the perspective of absolutely anyone, and at what time period. These are the huge, fundamental, exciting, scary decisions that authors make. So I think it would have been really interesting, probably exciting for Porter to do this adaptation and then do that swing of the spotlight. I thought that was
definitely.
really fascinating.
I mean, I read an interview with Max Porter for BFI, I think it was. And he she said, I mean, this is a direct quote, "It's funny, when I see it written down, adapted from the novel, I think, well, it's not really. I started it from scratch. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's an original screenplay," which I found really funny. But he has been a sort of long time collaborator with Cillian Murphy.
That's right.
And apparently went into writing this with Cillian Murphy's voice in mind. So he really wanted to create a role for Cillian that really like stretched him and was a sort of different role to what he'd previously done. So I thought it was really cool that they, at first I was like, how is this going to work? Because obviously the novel, like you said, we spend so much time in Shy's head. I was like, how is this going to work being in somebody else's head? But I do think it really works.
I do too, yeah. And I think like it had to be as dialed up, you know, in that interior mind as the novel is for Shy. We have to know Steve so sort of, I guess, viscerally. We have to be so close to him to kind of achieve that, which is then, I guess, such an interesting challenge as well, to kind of be able to create that interiority on screen. I feel like one, it's obviously the performance, which is incredible, but then to be able to find ways to get into his body and his mind in the way that you sort of do with the novel, which sort of works in such interesting ways to convey sort of a mind that is, I guess, unhappy, but also shifting all the time, that has so many different kind of voices and narratives in his head from other people, from himself, from his mother. And in the book, Porter does so many interesting things, even just with the page itself, in terms of like some text is larger. I found it really powerful that the text, there's some narrative of his mother comes sort of, it shouts across the page at you. It's huge, and it breaks across the spine, and it's sort of almost such a bodily experience of reading it. And to find ways to kind of get into Steve's body and mind in the same way would have, it seems, I can see how it feels like a whole new project in some ways. It's not like he's sitting there going, oh, how do I convey this page on the film? It's sort of like, no, that's the background text, that's the background history, to then do this whole other thing. And to me, it seems, I get excited just thinking about that as a writer. I think that would just be really, really fun and really exciting.
I think he's just got such a kind of playful style. I mean, obviously a lot of people say that it's experimental, which it is, but I think, you know, in the way that he explores sort of themes that would be considered as darker, he does it with, he always finds these sort of, would you describe it as like moments of levity? Like, is that the right way to describe it? Like, you know, like in the film, it's obviously exploring Steve's struggles with his mental health, and then there's like really daft moments where he's like trying to climb over the back of a washing machine, like, you know, really fumbling to try and like get hold of, you know, a substance that he's trying to take. And, you know, there's moments like that in the film, and then in the book there's like, you know, we often see Shy in conversation with himself, and there's a moment that I really loved where he's interviewing himself about how he got the role of Joseph in his Technicolor Dreamcoat.
I know. I loved that. It is a playfulness, actually. And there's a sort of a line early on about him having like a narrative going on in his head. I think I even wrote it down. Something like idiot drama with no audience, overthinking, overlapping voices. And I loved how that was almost a way into like he's almost dramatizing what's happening to him. But then Porter, as the writer, is also doing that through sort of making the stage directions in Shy, sort of saying the camera pans across the lawn sort of things. And to use that in the film, they've kind of made it more literal, in that there's a documentary being made about this institution for so-called troubled boys, troubled youths. And they've got the one day in, you know, the day in the life sort of film. It is the day that this documentary team are here. Steve's having, you know, a day. And then he's having a day here. But in the book, it's not quite as clear that there is anyone there. It's to film. It's more like setting it up as though it was. It's almost like if we did have this sort of, I guess, perspective on this school and what's happening, maybe this is what would have been said. It's very playful, because it's not like he doesn't set it up easily and say necessarily that I remember there's this, you know, there's a film crew here. He just sort of like throws in the line, the camera pans across the lawn, and you're like, you know, and then you're given this interesting new lens on Shy and on the school and what's happening. And then to pick that up and use it in the film, to actually have this camera crew there.
See, I I didn't
like
pick
that.
up on the camera panning across the lawn. I don't know how I
Yeah, there's
missed
not
that.
much of that.
Oh
There's a bit of
yeah, it's
stage direction going on. Yeah, I think maybe because I reread Shy, I think I picked up on that more. And but there's a bit of a like I think it's that overlapping voices that Shy mentions. There's like a bit of a voiceover sometimes. Like,
yes.
is this I don't know, a taxpayer funded holiday for troublemakers, or is this a progressive institution for,
Yes.
helping young boys or something? There's something like that. And again, I like that there's not a certainty. Like we don't know, has Shy just heard someone say that? Is that actually something has been said? It's almost like I think Porter likes to sort of throw in something that could have just been heard or said externally somewhere. Like that might just literally be, a line from a radio piece or a news item or something. Or it could be something that Shy has thought of himself and is kind of doing a bit of a narration of his own life. And it's, I like that we don't know for sure what that other voice is that pops in. And it goes to what your point about it being kind of playful in Shy as well.
Yeah, I do think that this sort of imaginative experimental style, it really lends itself to this story in particular because it obviously, like we've said, it delves so much into the protagonist's kind of imagination, and I found some of those moments quite difficult to read. There's like a nightmare that Shy has, which is amazing the way it's written, but he has this nightmare that's like 4 pages long, and it's really difficult to know when he's actually come out of the nightmare. And then obviously in the film it's only like a very small, because I was like, how is this going to translate to screen when I read it? And then it's just sort of a slight reference that Steve makes when he's telling a teacher about the different students. He says,
exactly.
Shy has nightmares.
Has nightmares. And it goes to, and that gets to like, I think a greater point around perspective is that like that nightmare was that in the book for Shy, and that was what it was for Shy. But then for everyone else around him, we have no idea what he's going through because it's said as like a passing statement of, he has nightmares. And I feel like that's, to me, it makes such a hard hitting point as well, that we can never really know another's interior life, another's nightmares, another's dreams, or anything. And it kind of gets you to think about all of those boys. There's dozens of them at this school, and to think, you could then literally have another whole film about another narrative. And it makes a good point about when someone's labeled troubled and has nightmares or that. And that documentation is such an interesting part of the film as well, and the book. I think like kind of each kid has, I guess, a profile about them or whatnot. And I think one of my favorite things that they've done with the adaptation is Steve is often using a handheld voice recorder and making notes. And I think Cillian Murphy does it so brilliantly because he's sort of babbling into it, and it gets like, sometimes he's like holding it as though like he's holding on for dear life. This is my one, thing that I can do, and he says to people, he's running around the school on this hectic day of filming the documentary, and he's like, that thing's, you're top of my list. He's like telling everyone that they're top of his list. And then he's going into this voice recorder and saying, must do this, must do that. But he's also, as you said, recording notes for a teacher to let them know like how each kid is doing and what to know about that person. And I thought that was such a brilliant device, literally, but like a literary writing device as well, to get at, I guess, how Steve feels about all of these students, and to get a little bit into kind of his interiority and kind of the idea of what he's saying into this voice recorder, what he's saying, day to day, but then also what he's doing, because it's all very hectic as he's recording. He's in a lot of physical pain because he's had, an injury that we eventually learn was a car accident. And so he's in pain, he's reliant on painkillers, he's gradually drinking more during the day. There's a lot of hectic stuff going on, but he's trying to kind of stay connected to some kind of tether through this voice recorder. And I just thought, what a brilliant stroke of like genius on Porter's part to kind of think of having that as a thing. And also so like 90s, it just felt very, thinking of like, the cassette days and whatnot. It just seemed very fitting in so many ways.
Yeah, with the recorder and then them listening on their Walkmans. I loved
all
of those little touchstones to it being the 90s.
Me too.
I really enjoyed that. You've got me thinking so much now about perspective and their use of it. I think it's really magical. Like I just loved the moment right towards the end when they're showing clips of the different boys that live at the school, and we're hearing Steve's thoughts on them.
On them,
And
yeah.
I thought that was so amazing the way they did that. But then also the opening of the film, when Steve is driving along this road and he's singing out the window, and then he spots Shy just dancing, and it's like dancing in the field, and it's like really warm lighting on Shy,
Yes.
and it's like,
Ah, yeah.
he's got his Walkman and he's just in his own little, and it's, it really shows, well, this is who Steve sees when he looks at that child.
Yes,
Whereas
that's
when we enter
beautiful.
the
Yeah.
school, it's like the documentary crew come in and this is who they see, because
Yes.
that's their perspective and that's what they want. They say all these like really like horrible critical things about, the
Yeah.
school and the children, but that first moment when we meet Shy, it's like, no, this is the person that believes in him, this is how he views him. I just thought that was such a nice, like,
Yes. Oh, I think that's a really beautiful, yeah, way to kind of see it. And I feel like in the book, Steve is just kind of he's a presence there. And there's
yeah,
some, like when I reread it, I was obviously more alert to Steve than I was the first time around. But yeah, like it says how he teaches them to garden and he takes them through like the names of plants and things. And there's like gentler moments that, yeah, suggest that he's the one that kind of really sees them and he's kind of trying to debrief with them after things happen. Yeah. And I think with back to it saying earlier how the casting of Shy in the film was so well done, I think because we're still with Shy. Even if you hadn't read the book, I think you would still feel for Shy so much through
yes,
Jay's, like his face, what he can do, particularly towards the end, as not, I don't want to spoil anything, but he's having a day as well, and it's there's certain points where you're really, really, I guess, worried for his well-being, and the way that we, there's so much that we don't get of Shy in the film, quite rightly, because it is swung around to Steve, but I think there is still so much power through that performance.
yeah, absolutely.
That was like brilliant.
I mean, there was a lot of stuff that I read in terms of Jay Lycurgo, like I think that's how you say his name,
I
Jay
think so.
Lycurgo. And he said on, like, creating that role, he said every day when I was on set, you'd find me in the corner with my Walkman, with my headphones on, just reading the book, probably reading the same passage again, but it just helped me stay in what he's thinking, what his imagination is, what his relationship is with his mum, what he hopes was his ambition. So it was an incredible resource. And then Max says on Jay, I mean, his Lycurgo's copy of it was weathered like a Bible. He carried
I
it
love that.
around, and I made him mixtapes and playlists. So all the time he had Shy's sounds in his ears, and they had to keep reminding him that, like, there was a script as well, like where he was so attached to the book. And I think that really comes through in Jay Lycurgo's performance, that you can really see that he's really spent time, reading the original text, which I love.
Which I love hearing that, because it kind of it shows you that the two texts are kind of working still together in a way. And I think it's almost perfect that he was more wedded to Shy as a text, because that is his character's like preparation. And I'm so glad you mentioned that his relationship with his mother, because that's probably one thing, like, it's definitely not a criticism of the film, but I think they couldn't convey that obviously as powerfully in the film. And I think it got me thinking about, like, obviously there's perspective as a writer, choosing what perspective you tell and you make certain choices, but also perspective as an audience, because I think if I had have watched this maybe as a teenager, I would have probably just seen my friends, guys I went to school with, or, classmates or whatnot. But then I've got a 2-year-old boy now. And so I'm like, I'm seeing it as the mother of a boy, I guess. And I think it was particularly powerful for me to reread Shy, and to all the mother's passages. They were literally on the page bigger, but I think for me they were so much bigger, because I was like, oh, his poor mother. Like, I was just thinking, oh my gosh, like, what has happened? I kept thinking, and what happened to her as well. And I think in the book, like, I think Porter does do justice to that, because he does sort of have lines around, I think your mum does know something about depression as well, Shy, and that sort of thing. It's not just, the mother isn't just cast as this problematic absent figure. Her voice is there all the time. Yes, it might be a bit of a, like, Shy hears her kind of in maybe a nagging way sometimes, and, what have you done to our family, and those sorts of lines. But there is a hint of, there's obviously some, there's some rupture, some trauma or patterns there that she's harmed by as well. And I think watching the film as well, I think I was sort of again struck by, what we don't know of Shy, but also all the circumstances around the boys. Like obviously we're only getting this one day. But I think I watched this more than any other film I've watched more recently. I think I just watched this as a mother in particular. And I found that, really interesting that even like 5 years ago, I probably would have said, like my dad was, before he retired, a high school teacher. And so I think I probably would have watched it from the perspective of like thinking of my dad and his experience teaching. And, he was teaching in an area that, low socioeconomic status and problem kids or whatnot. And like 30 years of that. And I think I see sort of Steve from, the perspective of all the teachers that I've grown up knowing through my dad having that career as well. But I think in different phases of your life, you watch something from where you're at. And so that, I think I've seen the different perspectives that I would see this film and book by, which also made me really want to talk about it with you, I think, because it got me, thinking about what lens I view things through.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I really zoned in on Shola. Is it Shola in the film that's played by Little Sims? Yes. Which I don't think she's in the book, or I don't recall her being mentioned.
No, or maybe not by that name.
I remember Amanda and Jenny, but I don't remember Shola. But I thought she was a great introduction, and I know it's because she wrote original music for the film, so it could be that she was like, I'll write music, but I want a role. Which fair play, because she was amazing.
Oh, totally. It worked out. For her perspective. It was,
definitely. But I think I zoned in on her perspective because I worked as a teaching assistant for SEN children for a couple of years. So I very much went into that environment, was really overwhelmed by it. And it ended up not working out for me because there wasn't the, as they say in the film, like we're under-resourced, we're understaffed.
Absolutely.
So I was like, I get it. Like, but the moment when she's in the canteen and they're all fighting and she's
that
screaming at them
epic
to stop.
fight. Yes. Oh my gosh.
It's
what
so
a scene.
intense.
And you like follow it literally through rooms.
It's so cleverly filmed.
It is,
But just touching back, on the mum, I think if I was to be super like looking for something that I missed in the film, which I love the film, but I did think the way that the book explored his relationship with his mum was really amazing. And there's a particular scene that I loved, which was the stepdad trying to encourage Shy to come and watch the childhood videos with them. And he watches it and then just completely flips, and you're like, what has triggered him? What about this nice home video was like really upset him? Which obviously you don't see moments like that in the film. You don't understand like what necessarily has gone on. You just see this like really heartbreaking conversation between him and his mum, where you can hear his mum's voice like cracking and saying like, it's done, I can't do this anymore, and him sort of trying to laugh it off. Like it's
absolutely
so
that's the kind of point in the film, like if you're watching it with someone, you pause it and be like, wait, you need to know this if you haven't read side. It makes you want to kind of fill that information. And it brings me to slight side note, but I remember there's in another film, but it's a Cillian Murphy film, Small Things Like These, the gorgeous adaptation of Claire Keegan's book, which I loved the book, loved the film. But there was this one moment in the book that, because it's a book about the Magdalen laundries in Ireland, they're also in Australia, and it's about women who were, their babies were taken away from them, and the women were working in these institutions. And there's this scene in the book where the main character, Bill, encounters a woman who has been sort of locked away, and we know her infant has recently been taken off her. And in the book, it talks about her top being wet, and she hasn't had her child for, I think, a few weeks or something, and she's like, her body wants to breastfeed it.
Yes.
And I can even feel my body reacting now, just in a physical, because I'm still breastfeeding my body. Yeah, I think that was in the book and not in the film. And I was thinking, no, they need to have that part about her bodily. I think I'm so interested in, representations of the body. Yes. And I felt like, no, you missed that key kind of bodily response in the film. But also I was thinking that's really hard not to just make very, very obvious in a film, and to hone in on it. But it's funny how it's such a nitpicky thing, but when you watching it from a certain perspective, and I was reading that book again, rereading it early postpartum, so that hit so hard for me.
I can imagine.
But 5 years earlier, I probably wouldn't have said anything. But it's just, it goes to show how how we get our certain things that we want to sort of see. Even if like I find adaptation, the art of it's so interesting, even I still find myself going, oh, but that wasn't in there.
Yeah,
Just find
yeah. I think
yourself
it's
doing
hard
it, I
not to,
think.
isn't it, when you become
Yeah,
attached to moments like that.
exactly.
But I just think Jay Lycurgo did such an incredible job in his performance. Like, just watching his face in that phone call is just like,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was,
No, so much around, I think, yeah, facial expressions and how what that kind of does. And I think in the documentary as they're filming, they're going around and asking everyone, I think it's teachers and students to describe themselves in 3 words. And
yes,
Steve says very, very tired. And the look
yes.
on Murphy's face then is so it's sort of haunting because it's just like the exhaustion like deep in the eyes, and to be able to convey that, like they both act so well with I don't know how they do it through the eyes and that like total kind of immersion. And yeah, this makes me think also about kind of when you're representing, I guess backstory and what you show to the audience, in film or in books. And in this, we don't get the full story around Steve, which I think is also really, it's quite satisfying to watch because I
Yeah.
like that we're still kind of unsure of, one, we don't get flashbacks to this accident that has been the very traumatic event that has sort of thrown Steve. And we don't until the very end. And I think it's worth probably not spoiling it, but it's an interesting slight plot turn. We don't really know anything about his home life or anything right
Yes.
until the very end. And I think, yeah, it got me thinking about sort of how you can still convey so much about a character through one day of their life, through us
Yes.
not really actually knowing all that much about him. We know something's happened to him. We know he's, relying on substances. We know he's sort of almost losing some kind of control. It's looking like the school's going to be closed. Sort of, we know the immediate day that he's in, but we don't get sort of maybe more traditional narrative devices like a flashback to a traumatic event that's playing in his mind. Which we feel like it must absolutely be. But to not show that, I kind of liked that restraint in the film as well, because it kept us just in that one really intense day.
Yes, definitely. I think it's a good time to come on to Tim Mealant's direction because, Tim Mealant's direction, I've unfortunately not looked up who the DOP is for this film, but seeing the
No,
camera work
actually.
and the way they directed it is so magical because they go from these moments of like real explosion, we're building towards something really explosive, and then we go from that to really like quieter moments. Like there's this magical moment with Amanda and Steve, and I'm going to give a little spoiler here, I'm sorry, this is your warning guys, but they're told that the school is being closed and they're having this quiet moment, I think in the evening later on, and he's kind of sat, he's obviously really like down, and she places a hand on his shoulder, and I think it focuses on the hand, and she
Yes.
says like, you can just see her face is so devastated, and she just says like, our boys are beautiful fucking terrible
Yeah.
boys, and it's just so
Gorgeous.
devastating, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
gorgeous the way they do that. And then there's another moment that is the very start when Steve is being interviewed and he says, can we just cut the cameras a second, I'm actually not okay. And when he
Yes,
says I'm actually
yeah.
not okay, and you can see it in his eyes that he's just not doing well. And then there's another scene
Absolutely.
that is
Yes.
just a completely different direction, which is like, I think it might have been filmed on a drone, and it's going through the house where Jenny the therapist and Amanda the deputy head and Steve the head teacher, they're all stood, they're talking, they're all upset, and the drone keeps travelling through that room out to where the boys are playing football in the pouring rain outside, to where Shy is just stood contemplating by the pond, and it just
Yes.
keeps moving
Yeah.
between it all. And I just thought like it was so magical the way that they sort of switched their styles throughout the film.
Absolutely. And to come to that kind of more bird's eye view towards the
Yes.
end, I think it was a beautiful kind of accumulation of
Yeah.
perspective, I think. Yeah. And it kind of makes me think as well of the use of that recording device and how at the
Yes.
end we kind of hear it, and then it's
Yeah.
like the descriptions of each of the students, and we kind of see them all at once. And that's sort of almost like a zooming out as well. But no, I agree, that balance between that sort of intensity and also the balance then between like amazing group dynamics and then
Yes.
like these really interior moments between either just one character. So often you're with Steve in these intense moments, and then you're in that, as we were saying, that that crazy amazing fight between the boys in the cafeteria. And yeah, just like it gets to that kind of the different energy that would be going on in a building like that, because yeah, you
Yes.
get all these teenage boys together, but then you've also got the teachers kind of in there because they stay over. They're on duty, and this is like, I guess, a key aspect of the plot as well, is that this is a night where Steve is on night duty with, with a couple of other teachers, and just to move across that day and into the night where things feel like they're kind of getting building. It's such a build, and I loved how it was really confined to that, I guess, 24-hour period. I think it did so much in that.
Absolutely. And I know that we've kind of stayed with Jay Lycurgo and Cillian Murphy, mostly talking about them in terms of casting, but I thought the casting was brilliant across the board.
Emily
like all
Watson,
the boys, Emily Watson,
and all the
amazing.
and all the guys. That's right. And they feel so, I don't know the individual actors' names, but I feel like I can see them, and when they're talked about at the end, you're like, they're quite cemented in your mind. When Steve's giving his summary of all the guys, you're like, I feel like, as I said earlier, like I feel like you could easily then unpack one of those, and it goes to show you kind of the possibilities with a kind of a rich script like that.
But they were so funny.
Totally.
Like there was Jamie, who was kind of positioned as the like big troublemaker, but when he was doing his interview and he's asked what he would say to like past him, and he's like, Jamie, you sexy little bastard. And then he just starts, rattling things off, and they're like, whoa, okay, we're going to cut, like, he takes it too far. But I found him really funny. There's the moment where they're all sort of gyrating at the window at the crew and, and like doing all these faces.
Because there's that like, older, your white middle-aged guy in his suit kind of coming
the
in.
MP,
yes. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Hilarious.
And that line is direct from the book. I love that they kept that in. I think they captured the energy of the book perfectly. We really got a sense of that chaos.
I agree. And the music as well, like, because the music is such an important aspect of this. And it's funny, like, I remember there's a line where Emily Watson sort of says to Shai, like, I think your music is too kind of jittery or something. I think it's like it's impacting your mind and your behavior and things. But we go back, as you mentioned earlier, that scene at the start with Shai just kind of dancing in the paddock. We see like that's him. That's kind of what he loves. But I love hearing that Porter made a playlist as well for Jay. I think that's I feel like that would have been like a huge element of just getting into this film and getting into his mind.
Yeah, definitely. He also apparently wrote, because Shai's character is very into like drum and bass. Apparently Max Porter wrote to the BPM of drum and bass whilst he was writing Shai.
Oh, no way!
Which I thought is such a fun behind the scenes. Like
I did not know that. That's a fascinating little nugget.
Yeah, and
what a creative process.
Yeah, it's a great insight. I do think the role of music definitely becomes apparent in the film as well. And I loved the moment where Shai sat on the sofa in his like sort of therapy session with Jenny, I think it is. And we're just, the camera's on him and we can just hear the music that he's listening to.
Yes, yeah.
And we can see Emily Watson's like lips moving, but we can't hear what she's saying. And he just takes it off and he's back down to earth. And
it's such an amazing way of conveying an individual viewpoint. You can literally be in a room with someone and not kind of listening to them. And I think like the perspective and what someone's hearing is so, I kind of love that, because we're often so much into kind of what someone's saying to somebody else or what they're seeing, but just to kind of, that's one way of like just completely enveloping us in Shai for a little while, which I think it's a very wonderful way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I am aware of time.
Oh yes, I know. I feel like we could just keep talking about.
I could keep talking, honestly.
So
I think it would be good if we can rattle off some last thoughts. I wanted to just flag there are a couple of things that I really love about this book. I loved the section when he's wasted and the writing feels like the writing replicates that kind of drunken, slurred style. I thought that was really cool. There is just a gorgeous sentence that I just wanted to read out. The night is huge and it hurts. I just thought that was so beautiful. I think there's some sentences in his work that just really hit you in the gut. Like,
so kind of simple, but the way that they're threaded through. There's so much rhythm. They kind of they land because you're kind of carried to them. Yeah, absolutely. So much musicality to the writing, I think. yeah, there's
Yeah.
so much, yeah, incredible rhythm. And I agree. I feel like the novel is something that works with the kind of texture of writing of a page. I think it's sort of that's what, yeah, to me it's so exciting to see how he can convey that, what kind of constraints he works with in even the kind of the use of the font or where the words are on the page or what he chooses not to put in. I think there's so much power in restraint, and I think it's so hard to achieve, the end that you're aiming for as a writer, using words but also not. And I think he finds, he somehow just kind of, that's, I guess, his craft is getting that balance. So yeah, it's just there's just so much in it. And I've also listened to it actually as an audio, which was, I think quite intense in some ways. Because obviously, you're in this his voice. It was almost like there was a slight echo as a choice, I think, in the recording. It was almost like he was kind of in a room with a bit of a resonance going on. It was I can't remember who the actor is who plays it, but worth listening to. Was like a different way into the experience, into the book.
I think I'd love to listen to it, because I did find it, there was a lot of passages that I had to kind of keep reading, and that's not a reflection at all on his talents. He's an incredible writer, obviously, but I think there were certain passages that I kind of struggled with, and I was like, oh, like whose perspective are we hearing from here? But I like books that really make you think, and I feel like
it's a good kind of challenge, and you almost feel, because I think Porter is inspired so much to do something really different. Like I know with the death of Francis Bacon, I think he wanted his writing to be like painting almost. And with this, with Shy, it almost feels like, it's a book that was said first and then written down, or heard first and written down, which I find really, so fascinating. But I agree. It's sort of, it takes a certain power of concentration, which is a great thing, but also, a little bit of work in a good way.
Absolutely. I do really want to just mention when they have the really serious meeting and Cillian Murphy just kind of covers puts his head in his hands and he's just like repeating, shut up, shut up, shut up. And then he goes, shut up or I'll jump over this table and strangle you with my bare hands. I just really wanted to mention that because I mean, I love Cillian Murphy, he's a phenomenal actor, but it's moments like that when it's not even like he's screaming or he's, it's this huge fit of rage, but you just feel the sort of intensity of the rage he's feeling. You just really get a sense of that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's almost more frightening, because you can kind of feel it, kind of in expression and in the body. And you get the sense through, Murphy, I think, of how bodily, obviously it's a very obvious point, but just how bodily, acting is. And to me, that's so fascinating to think of what even that must feel like to convey that. Like it must be so interesting to think, like, to wonder how much you're feeling that to then represent it. I find that such an interesting, idea around, what the body of the actor goes through and then therefore how that kind of, impacts them or experience. Because it must be, it must take so long to kind of get to that point where you're in that anger to then convey that. It's sort of, wildly talented. But I'm glad you mentioned that scene.
He's such a talent. I mean, I thought the whole cast were brilliant. I love them all. Have you got any last thoughts that you want to give?
No, I feel like we've covered so much of what I was thinking about, and just all the things that afterwards I sort of turned to my partner and was like, oh, I could just like babble on about this for ages. I think there was one point that it's going to be too much of a spoiler to kind of go into detail, but just more to kind of put in as a suggestion. The very final scene, we finished watching it and I made my partner rewind it so we could watch the last like minute, because I just felt there was, I love ambiguity, but I also felt like not sure what might be going to happen when Steve kind of as such exits the stage, if you know what I mean. So I was like, oh, is he like, okay, what's going to happen now? And I found that, I really could just be like not mundane in a negative sense, but just like this is the end of the film kind of thing. Or it could have been something, very dramatic going to happen at the end. And I felt like I wasn't sure, but I don't want to spoil anything because I feel like there's so much in the last like 2 minutes that kind of come at you quite powerfully, in terms of, as I said, we don't know anything about Steve's home life or anything until those last few minutes. And I found that it kind of threw me in a good way though. The last few minutes, I thought, wow, I thought we were at the end of the film, but there was just, these additional layers added at the end, which I thought was very powerful.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of way that Porter's style comes through, because so often in his work it's the lines do feel really blurred in terms of what is reality and what is imagined, and
Yes, yeah.
what is this, character imagining doing XYZ, or is it, is he just entertaining the idea of it?
Absolutely, particularly in Shy, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And I think the sort of I wonder if maybe he had to sort of strip his style back a little bit for the screen adaptation, because it was for
Mm,
Netflix and they maybe wanted a more commercial audience. If they were like,
yeah.
maybe you can't just completely lean into your, he does have a very quirky, unusual style and it's very
Yes,
experimental. I
yeah,
wonder if
yeah.
he would have gone further had it not have been for such a huge, I don't know what you would call Netflix. Like, what is it? Not production
Yeah.
company, like
I guess, yeah, like corporation
corporation.
giant.
Yeah,
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 yeah, it's
yeah.
true. Yeah, I didn't, it's a good point that, like, I guess, because there's been other interesting projects out there. That's probably one worth mentioning. It's a small, almost like a little monologue called All of This Unreal Time that Porter wrote. And it was put out through Rough Trade Books, a small press. I think it's based
Oh,
in the UK, and it's kind of this really powerful kind of internal monologue of a man. And I feel like I know that he did an adaptation of that with Cillian Murphy, and I haven't seen it. I don't know. I don't think it's maybe available. It's sort of something that was maybe done at a film festival or something.
right.
But you're right. Like I imagine that would have probably been able to lean way more into kind of like experimental style, whereas something like this, yeah, maybe needed the narrative tie up sort of things here and there. So
But there's definitely that scene with Cillian Murphy lay on the floor in the like with the washing machines, and there's all
mm,
the water comes in above him, and there's like this sort of mirror image
yes.
kind of
Oh,
thing going on.
yes.
So
Yeah, I'm glad
that's
you mentioned the washing machine a couple of times because I feel like that is such a, yeah, that space there. You feel
yeah,
like this is where he goes all the time to get his pain relief.
yes.
But there's probably this, space that he like, hates and relies on and needs and probably spends a lot of time there. And it's, yeah, I feel like quite another like textural kind of detail of place, I think.
Yes.
I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
feel
much
like
in this.
I feel
Could
like we
go for
could have
another
spoken
hour.
about this for hours. Yeah,
I
it's
know.
such a, but I think ultimately I really love this as an adaptation. I think the book is brilliant. He's such an incredible writer. And I think the film, whilst Porter himself says that this is not, he doesn't see it as an adaptation, he sees it
Yeah,
as an
yeah.
original screenplay. I will say that I do think it's an incredible adaptation. So
Yeah,
I'm really
yeah.
glad you brought this to the table.
Oh, thank you for having me. No, it's been so great to chat about. So much, yeah, so many things to think about. It's been really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Lastly, Catherine, I want to ask what you would like to plug.
Oh, yes, sure. I'm glad you prepped me about this as well because I've been traveling for the last sort of month now, and with a toddler, so not getting all that much reading done, but I keep buying books. And I finally started one that I bought. It's called My Husband.
Is it Maud
And it's,
Ventura?
yes,
Yes.
yeah, I've just started it, and it was a staff recommendation at one of the bookshops I was
Oh,
going
amazing.
through. And yeah, I feel like I kind of in my I love like psychological drama or I don't know if it's thrillery, but it's sort of yeah, it's got really
It's
I'm
got
really
that
liking
atmosphere
it.
to it.
It does, yeah. It reminds me in some ways of Annie Ernaux's Simple Passion in the sense that it's about a
Okay.
woman's kind of singular fixation on
Yes.
on a man, but in this sense, it's the man she's been married to for 15 years. And I found that so interesting, the thought of, she's this woman who sounds like she's got this huge crush on this person she's just met, and you can't stop thinking about them. She hears their name and her ears prick up. But the fact that we see that as strange when it's someone that we've been married to for 15 years, but there's so much more going underneath, I think. So I'm only partway through. And I think it's also saying interesting things about class as well, because I think this woman's trying to sort of perform to a class of wealth that is, so far beyond what she grew up with that she feels like an imposter. So she kind of doesn't feel like she's real, even though she's got all these, beautiful things and the apartment and things. You get the sense she just feels like she's kind of made herself into a character and that she's scared she's going to slip up and not be able to represent herself as that character. So yeah, I feel like there's a lot going on in it already. And it's told just from like, I think it's a Monday to Friday or a 6-day period or something. So it's like nice. I like when, yeah, writers work with a constraint like that. So yeah, I
Yeah,
can, yeah,
me
definitely
too.
recommend that one that I'm reading at the moment.
Amazing. And of course, I can recommend your book, Body Friend. I need to get my
Thank
hands on
you.
your other books, but alas, we need them in the UK.
Fingers crossed. Also, I need to send you a copy.
Oh my God, stop. I would love that. But thank you so much for joining me today, Katherine. This has been an absolute joy.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's nice. I'm just in the UK for a few more days, and it feels like a bit of a nice tradition that when I'm here, I get to have a chat to you. So hopefully
we must do it again.
We'll do it again, yeah, on the next visit.
Definitely. And listeners, I'll be popping a link in the show notes to grab yourselves a copy of Katherine's books. I will also pop links in the show notes to Shy by Max Porter, and a link if you want to watch Steve on Netflix. I will also pop links to give Katherine a follow, and if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate, review and subscribe. And if you want to give us a follow, you can do so at Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at Pair of Bookends on TikTok. That's all we've got time for. Thanks so much for listening, and thank you again, Katherine.
Thank you.
Bye.